205th meeting, the audit committee of the St. Louis Sewer District, Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. Roll call by the chair.
All right, we'll note that all trustees are present except Trustee Wabi, who has not joined yet.
The approval of the committee meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
No comments by the chair. Internal audit.
All right, hold on just a second. I think we've got them. Oh, good.
Good morning.
Good morning, Trustee Wabi. Can you hear us okay?
Indeed, I can.
Very good. All right, we are just getting started. We will add you to the roll. And then Glenn, do you need a minute?
No, we sold the.
Okay, very good. All right, so first item that we've got is an internal audit update on IT-related engagements, presentation of an internal audit report. We've got Todd Loretta and Bill Gogol from Armanino, who is the internal audit firm.
All right, so good morning, everybody. So we'll use this presentation document to go over both those items that he mentioned. Well, as Tim did mention, Bill is here. I'm gonna go over most of it, but if you have any questions, he's probably gonna answer them. He did a lot of the work on this. He's kind of IT. He has a lot more technical knowledge around IT than I do, so I might defer to him on some questions. So let's open the slide deck to slide 2. So I'll give you a little update on IT-related engagements. We just completed an attack penetration audit. We're performing those annually, as I've told you guys before. We saw even more improvement on this audit, so that was a good thing to see. We'll have that report for you either next meeting or the following meeting. Depends on how it fits in with the rest of our presentations. We're also doing phishing testing this week. That is where we send emails out to the employees to simulate phishing by bad actors and see how the employees react. Last time it went well, but I think it's a good test to do every year. So we're doing that right now as well. The next 3 items are all related to business continuity and disaster recovery. The middle item there is the audit we're going to talk about today. This whole area of business continuity and disaster recovery is really an area that's maturing, and we are basically auditing it as it's maturing and as it's been developed and implemented. So with that in mind, we're going to do another audit in probably the fall. IT is going to do another test, another exercise in the fall. And then we're also going to do a plant pump station cybersecurity audit probably in the spring next year. They have separate disaster recovery procedures for those systems, so we're going to do a separate audit for that. If they get those developed a little earlier, we might move that audit up. So those systems were not part of the audit we're going to talk about today, so I just wanted to point that out. So any questions? So with that, let's move to slide 4. So the last time we actually looked at this area was in 2018, and it was limited strictly to the area of payroll. The overall program was still in the very early stages of development at that point. If you look at the graphic in the middle of the page there, you see in FY19, the district actually added the disaster recovery plan to its strategic planning. FY20, business impact analysis was performed. FY21, they established the recovery sites, which are away from here. They're out in Springfield. You need that when you do disaster recovery. And so we're now in FY22. They actually have performed their first exercise or test, and that was included in our audit. Move to slide 5. I just want to take a quick minute to address the concepts of business continuity versus disaster recovery. Those terms are kind of thrown around interchangeably a lot, but they're not the same thing. Disaster recovery is a component of business continuity. If you move to slide 6, so business continuity is more of a broad plan that focuses on the business as a whole. Its objective is to keep the critical operations functioning. Now, disaster recovery is more focused on a specific part of that wider business continuity plan. It's usually focused on the data and the systems of the business, and it's usually handled, driven by IT. So again, I don't want to spend too much time. I just kind of want to explain the differences a little bit. So any questions? Slide 7, district DR plan classifies the systems into 5 different tiers. And those tiers are based on system criticality. You can see the listing of the tiers right there. The first 2 tiers, the foundational, that's the infrastructure, that's the hardware, networking. The second tier, mission critical, that's our Maximo and Oracle system. Those are our main systems. If those aren't running, we're kind of dead in the water. So as part of the district's exercise, which was included in this audit, they looked at those 2 tiers. So let's move on to slide 8. So the scope of this engagement consisted of a review of the district's BCDR program, which encompasses IT and some business functions. We performed it in February through April, parts of those months. As I mentioned, IT personnel did perform an exercise during the week of February 28th. That exercise and related results were a part of our scope. We move to slide 9. So the overall objectives of our audit and the overall BC and DR plan is to make sure, in the occurrence of an unplanned event, district has the ability to execute backup and continuity procedures and is able to recover and get the systems up and running and make sure operations keep going. In a nutshell, that's the main goal here. So as a part of that, we wanted to make sure the procedures are adequately documented, they're adequately designed, they're adequately communicated across the district. We did have an opportunity recommendation around the documentation. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. Slide 10. So we wanted to make sure the program procedures include steps that involve identifying and prioritizing the business operations. They're identifying the requirements for continued operation. There's a workaround planning. There's testing, so obviously there's testing because they did some testing as part of this audit. We did have a recommendation around how the testing is done, performed. We want to make sure there is emergency preparedness items such as communications protocol, evacuation protocol, and then we'll also make sure there is tracking or reporting of the testing results. So the idea of doing this test is to identify lessons learned, so to speak, so keep improving the area. So they're probably going to do numerous tests over the years, so keep improving the area. So moving on to slide 11, we did. As far as approach and methodology, we did a lot of interviews with the team. They provided us with a lot of documentation. There's a lot of documentation around this area. Some of the items that we looked at are below. That's Emergency Operations Plan, the EOP. That is the overarching document, the Business Continuity Plan. Then there's also a Disaster Recovery Plan document. A couple other documents that are recovery and tiering requirements and the DR tiers. We did have a recommendation around the Emergency Operations Plan document that we'll talk about it later. Slide 12, we did obtain access to the team's shared file site. That's where all the documentation regarding this exercise were located. Reviewed the steps taken that were taken as part of the exercise. We did review and analyze results of the exercise. We looked at all other documentation that kind of were the guidelines for this exercise. We did hold a post-exercise meeting with the process owners. We discussed the results, any lessons learned, and the plans for future exercises and so forth. Let's see, slide 13, as far as results, this went well, satisfactory. We have a satisfactory opinion. Now, to reiterate, this whole area is still maturing. So we came into it viewing it through that type of a lens. We are auditing as it's been developed and implemented. So, but we do have two recommendations. The first one has to do with the testing procedures. So that's more directed at IT. The second item is a review and update of the emergency operations plan. That document really is owned by executive management, so that's really directed at executive management as a whole. We go on to slide 14. So our first item is related to the testing. So it's titled "Testing Performed by Business Process Owners." So again, this involves a testing exercise. As I mentioned, IT personnel did perform an exercise during the week of February 28th. So the goal of the exercise was recover IT systems and measure the recovery times. Hopefully they won't hit their goals. The exercise was performed on the first two tiers, the foundational tier and the mission critical tier. Once the systems were recovered, IT did perform some tests to make sure the systems were operating properly. However, there were no tests performed by actual process owners. In other words, no tests were performed by personnel who actually use those systems. So that's not what we were going to recommend. So this was the initial attempt at this overall type of exercise, and I think it is IT's intent to eventually include that in the next exercise, which they're going to perform in the fall. So our recommendation is, well, again, a best practice at slide 15 is to have, again, personnel who use those systems on a daily basis to actually do some testing to make sure the transactions are working properly and the systems are truly operating properly. So our recommendation is, IT follow through with their plans to have another test in the fall. And then as part of that test, include testing by actual daily users of those systems so they can see how it's performing. Any questions on that one? So second item at slide 16 is a review and update of emergency operations plan. Again, this one's really directed at executive management as a whole, not really on a IT document necessarily. So when we looked at the plan, we noted that the last time it was viewed and updated was in FY19. So we went through the plan and we noticed, there are some inaccuracies in the plan. The critical on-call staff listing is not accurate. There have been personnel changes. The critical risk management vendor listing is not up to date either. Vendors have changed. The board of trustee listing was not accurate as well. It does appear that the overall procedures are accurate. It's mainly the players and the resources within the document that need to be updated. There is a provision in the document that requires it to be reviewed and updated annually. If you go to slide 17, so we're recommending, it's pretty straightforward recommendation, that management, first of all, go through the document and update it for the 2022 information, and then implement some procedures to make sure the document is reviewed and updated annually. So, you guys have any questions? Anything you want to add, Bill? Go ahead, sir.
And you probably answered it, and it went by me. You said earlier that the business contingency operation plan belongs to senior manager.
Correct.
That's what I heard you say. Who owns the disaster recovery?
That's mainly IT, I would say.
Okay. Does the disaster recovery, you're testing those aspects of this audit?
Right.
Is that correct? Then who, and you indicated that you had not tested the business process owners, not been brought in to make sure the business operation.
Well,
after they did the disaster recovery on the IT side, you intend next time to bring in the.
Right, we intend to, the idea is to bring personnel who actually use Oracle to book, general ledger or whatever it might be, and then run some transactions and see if it runs properly.
Is this, or was this audit to assure that the disaster recovery plan would work, or was it just to check that? I don't know how to put this, except if you can't be sure at this point that disaster recovery was effective if you haven't tested the business process.
Sure. I'm gonna let Bill answer this a little bit.
And I guess that's where, because the true disaster recovery, if a disaster happened
Right.
and you went through the plan, the last step should be to make sure that the business process is functioning.
Okay.
But we haven't gotten to that point
You
in
wanna-
this test, is that correct?
It's one thing to have a plan and make sure it's updated. It's another to make sure that if you had to execute the plan
Right.
works.
That's one.
Right, and I think there's aspects of it, like IT has tested some pieces, but I know there's other business aspects too that were not tested as part of this to make sure they function.
Go
Sure.
ahead.
Was our initial disaster recovery plan of the IT systems, but we did test the system. So we simulated a failure, brought the whole disaster recovery site up and tested all the major systems, but we didn't do a broad, loaded system, including the business. So we have business specialists within IT that made sure that our work order system worked and tested it. We made sure that our Oracle system was up and running. We just didn't load test it with the business running it. Like we didn't actually fail it and then put 1,000 users on it. We tested it just with a, simulated test run. So everything was recovered, everything was tested, just not a true loaded.
Well, the load
business
test
test.
wasn't what I was
Right.
worried about. I'm more
Yeah, so that's the
concerned
next,
that
yeah.
we are doing the end-to-end testing to
Yeah,
include
Sure.
the
That was, that's,
process.
so this was
Business
designed to be just that initial test to make sure we could recover and get the systems up and working. And that's what the fall was where we plan to do a true, involve the business and load test it and do a true failover.
So basically, this is like change management. Your change management testing. Change the system, you've got a series of tests that you run to make sure that the system functions.
And make sure that our procedures worked and make
Right.
sure we take notes and yes, and the whole
Thank you.
initial test, yes, correct. And then the broader test
Apologize
is
for
scheduled for later.
interrupting.
That answer your questions?
Yeah.
All right, thank
Okay.
Right.
You wanna add? All right. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Can I ask, this
Sure.
is
Oh,
something
yeah,
on internal audit generally, not on this specific audit, but I think I may have mentioned this before. We receive these presentations and these opportunities for improvement they seem like good opportunities that should be pursued. I think one thing that we don't see is sort of, who's going to own each opportunity for improvement? What's the timeline for implementation?
Okay.
And then ultimately, are these opportunities for improvement, are they implemented? Are they abandoned? And I don't think we really see that ever. So is there an opportunity for like a presentation to the board on that piece?
There is, so we can add some of that to these process owners. Sometimes we have process owner updates in
Right.
here, but we can be more clear who owns this. We don't
Right.
usually put time frame for implementation. Sometimes we do.
Yeah, they're in the report, there's a response from the process owner and there's a timeline that we asked them to put in there. I just haven't included it recently. I can start adding that back. And annually, we do a follow-up on all the open recommendations. That's usually in October. So we go back and usually around August, and I go and find out where things stand on each one of these and make sure things have been implemented. And I provide an update you guys to see what's open and what is open, and I'll let you know what the status of those open items is. So we can start adding that to this presentation if you would like. Definitely that would be helpful.
Yeah, the annual update is because you're going back over years of stuff. Most things have been addressed, but we can make sure that that is clear about, ownership, initial time frame, and then if it's not closed out yet, what the issues are.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Bill, thank you for your time. You are welcome to get on with your day. All right, we do have one more item on the agenda today, and that is an ordinance that will be up for introduction for internal audit services. Bill is from Armanino, who is our internal auditor. We use an outside firm, so I'm going to go through this next presentation. So starting on that inside page, page 2, internal audit is actually defined in the charter. The internal auditor is defined in the charter. Charter allows us to have a person or a firm. We have historically recently used a firm because it provides us more depth, more knowledge, more expertise, especially as things like IT have gotten more involved and more complicated. It gives the organization, I think, more comfort that we have experts checking everything out. So the board actually, or I'm sorry, the auditor actually does report to the board, so that provides some autonomy. So that if they see issues that they are not comfortable bringing to management, for example, because management might be involved, they can go directly to the board. Next slide. The objectives of the RFP were really to choose firms that can provide the following functions. So we want to make sure, obviously, that we are providing a cost-effective level of accountability to ratepayers and bondholders. The board is comfortable with that. We want to make sure that we have all these individual areas covered, primarily construction, which is our largest expense, and IT. So expert functionality in those areas are very important. And overall, what the internal auditor does is they review internal controls, they review management practices, and overall district operations for efficiency and effectiveness. So because of COVID the last couple of years, you haven't seen the Armanino staff as often, but that should change going forward. They usually come in when we do these, so that you've got not just Todd, but somebody else too who's active in performing the audit there to ask questions about. The next slide, here's just a summary of the way the RFP went. It was sent out to over 50 firms. We got 7 qualified responses. It was actually a very good response. From a price standpoint, we got quotes ranging from $140 to $235 an hour in year one, pretty broad. That's about $280,000 to $445,000 for the first year, and an estimated 1,900 hours, which is what we expect the auditor to put in. And then there are some escalators typically in most of these proposals. It is up to a 5-year contract. 5-year cost estimates total 1.4 to 2.3 million. That's not out of line with what we've had in the past. The evaluation team for these proposals was myself, Marion, and Todd. On the next page, this is just an idea of the scoring. This is how we did the scoring, or the ranks, I should say, in the areas that we looked at, as well as the 7 firms that responded. So we looked at responsiveness to the RFP, how complete they were in answering our questions and providing a plan that would address what we asked them to address, their experience and reliability. This could be size of the firm, the areas in which they have expertise or needed to go out and get expertise. Cost was a factor, and then references. Usually in references, what we're looking for is, have they serviced firms that are like ours, and did they get good references? So you can see, if you look at these, that Armanino, who is the firm that is providing the services currently, scored very highly in responsiveness and experience. They were not the lowest cost, but they were toward the end of the lower cost. They also had a workforce multiplier, so diversity reviews documentation they put forward about the women and minority employees they have in their local office, and you can earn a multiplier on your score if you are above certain thresholds. So they, CBIZ and Weaver Tidwell, all earned a workforce multiplier, helps in the overall scoring. So the final rank, we had Armanino number 1. So the recommendation is to retain Armanino to continue with the internal audit services. And so just talk a little bit about them on the next couple of pages. So that's the recommendation that's coming forward in the ordinance. Brown Smith Wallace, since 2011, has been our internal auditor. Armanino acquired Brown Smith Wallace last year. We are keeping right now the same team, so the same people that have served us recently are still working on our account. They have a lot of big St. Louis presence. They're a large firm, a lot of public sector expertise. Do a lot of work with the city and the county and other and school boards, a lot of different municipal entities in the area. What we really like about them is they have very strong construction auditing capabilities and very strong IT capabilities, which is a huge plus, especially given that we spend so much money on construction. They have also proposed having a subcontractor, an MBE subcontractor, Thurman L. Brooks. Thurman Brooks would be new to the engagement. So they are pitching 10 to 20% participation. Thermal Brooks is headquartered in St. Louis, does have experience with public entities, and so we think that'll be a good addition to the team. Next page, just a summary financial. Again, 10 to 20% of the costs go to Thurman Brooks. We're looking at rates overall for Armanino starting at $160 an hour in year 1, increasing about 2.5% a year to 180 hours in year 5. On an annual basis, that's roughly $304,000 to $342,000, assuming they are engaged for each of the 5 years. So that is the presentation and the recommendation. Are there any questions or concerns about the RFP process or Armanino? All right, if not, that concludes the business for the audit meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Next meeting, tentative date, May 1st, 2020. Meeting.
Trustee Wabi will let you know once we're done switching documents out.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 229th meeting of the Program Management Committee for the St. Louis Metropolitan Sewer District. Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. Can I get a roll call? Approval of the committee minutes for April 5th, 2022.
Second.
No comments by the chair. Engineering Department.
Good morning, trustees. I'm going to review the agenda items that you guys will be voting on next Thursday. First 3 items on the agenda are CSO volume reduction green infrastructure grants being provided in the community. This first ordinance is for Amarant GSI retrofit. Ordinance will authorize the district to enter into agreement with HGS LLC to provide financial assistance through the grant program. The purpose of the project is to reduce combined sewer overflows of the Mississippi River per the long-term control plan, the consent decree. This project will reduce runoff with the installation of 4 bioretention basins. The total cost of the project is estimated at $891,000, and the HGS LLC is requesting $891,000 reimbursement for the cost of the green infrastructure. In your package, you'll have a drawing showing where this project's located. It's just down the street here in the Shodo and 18th Street area at the Amarant main campus. They're redoing their parking facilities and putting in green infrastructure to capture their parking lot runoff, thus reducing the overflow. Next project is a green infrastructure for Preservation Square, Phase 2B project. I'd authorize the district to enter into agreement with Preservation Square 123 Landlord LLC. Again, it reduces overflow to the Mississippi River toward in compliance with the long-term control plan. Project will reduce the runoff with the installation of one bioretention basin and permeable pavement at several locations. The cost of the project is estimated at approximately $602,000. They are requesting approximately $284,400 reimbursement for the project. This project is located just north of downtown in the Preservation Square apartment area. And you'll notice one bioretention and several permeable pavement areas in the parking lot, which will capture that runoff and put it into the ground before it reaches the stormwater system. Next item is the Green Infrastructure Grant for Good Samaritan Missionary Baptist Church. This ordinance authorized the district to enter an agreement with Good Samaritan Missionary Baptist Church, again providing financial assistance through the grant program, again reducing combined sewer overflows to the Mississippi River. This project will reduce runoff with the installation of one bioretention basin. The cost of the project is estimated at $46,434. The church is asking for $23,400 in reimbursement for the project. This project is located in the North City area, near Natural Bridge and North Newstead. Again, in the center of the drawing, you'll see the church, and then the parking lot just to the south of the church. And they're, again, redoing their parking lot and going to capture the runoff into a green infrastructure bioretention basin. Any questions on the three grant program? All right, the next item is Abyssal Treatment Point Wastewater Treatment Facility Trickling Filter Media Replacement. This is an appropriation of additional funds to an ongoing construction contract that we have with Goodwin Brothers. This is a planned supplemental appropriation. In other words, we appropriated the initial dollars for the project in fiscal year 22, and I'm sorry, in 21, and then here we are, the second appropriation in fiscal year 22. The work to be done consists of removal and replacement of corrugated PVC sheet media and ancillary components to 6 trickling filters. The purpose of the project is to extend the useful life of the trickling filters in order to maintain the current service level for treatment. This partial supplemental appropriation is for $11 million. Will bring our total appropriation for this project to $25 million and fully fund the project. The original material cost for the trickling filters made up about $11 million of the overall $25 million value. During the construction of this project, 2 issues occurred which significantly escalated the price of the media that we were using on the project. The first is that the petroleum prices increased sharply, causing significant escalation price in the media. And then secondly, after construction began, the media supplier that we were using for this project unfortunately went out of business. So obviously we had significant escalation on the project. So staff sat down and we discussed what our options were with regard to the project, whether or not we would cut the project short or we would come and ask for additional money to do all 6 trickling filters. What we determined based on the operation of the plant and working with Brett and his folks, we felt like the best way to proceed with the project, rather than asking for additional dollars and going above what budgeted funds we do have, we went back to the contractor and felt like it was more appropriate to reduce the overall scope of the project. Instead of repairing all 6 trickling filter media, is that we worked out an agreement to replace 4 of the trickling filter media and then just make repairs on the other 2 that would allow us at a future time to go back to them. I do have Alan Mueller here, my construction manager, who worked with the contractor to do this. What this will allow is, right now we utilize approximately 3 of the trickling filter media, during normal times, 2 to 3, but during peak wet weather, they all go into operation, at least 5 of them. We felt like 2 of them could stand to wait a few years, but we felt like to have that additional 4th one all completed. But so we wanted to bring that up simply because everybody's aware of escalating costs, supply chain issues. This is probably, we've had some other minor ones, but this has probably been the most significant that we've seen so far to date. And we see a little bit in the bids, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the projects today. But is there any questions at this time? Alan, is there anything that you would add?
So what was the escalated cost?
The estimated cost to do all 6 was $25 million.
And the supplemental appropriation that you all are recommending is 11 million. How much of that was budgeted?
That's part of the original.
Same, so it's the same.
Correct.
Amount. Okay.
So rather than tax the budget with additional cost, which I think was probably going to be another 10 million.
It would have been another 10+ million, yes.
To complete the other 2, we felt like it was appropriate. Those are the things we've done in the past where we've seen significant change in a project or escalation or things like that. We look at what our options are, and we felt like this was probably the more appropriate option as opposed to taxing the budget for an addition. We have, kind of along the same line on supply chain and escalation. We've been managing it basically project by project. Probably the biggest one we've seen so far on some projects that are ongoing is the fiberglass reinforced pipe. It's something we use for our large diameter tunnels. We use it for our large diameter direct bury projects. So we've had some escalation on that. We've talked with contractors on those. Obviously, a lot of those aren't ones we have the option to reduce the scope of the project because we need to have the larger pipe in there to address the project itself. So in the future, there will be a couple projects where we'll be coming back to the board for a supplemental appropriation on those particular products. The rest we've managed fairly well. And then we have another large project that I'm going to talk about today that we were aware there potentially could be escalation. It's about a 3-year project. So we included language in that contract, that would allow the district and the contractor to negotiate those escalations going forward. And I'll talk a little bit about that.
So then what do you do with the work that wasn't completed? You just put it out for, a year or 2 years?
Yeah, well, our plan is we're going to the rate commission next year, is we would put it into the next rate cycle. And then obviously we'll make the same explanation to the rate commission, that where that project, how it evolved, and make that discussion with it. Okay. Next project is the Hampton Creek Sanitary Relief Phase 1B. This appropriates funds for an existing intergovernmental agreement we have with the city of Brentwood. Back in March of 2020, the board authorized the district to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Brentwood. This ordinance authorized the district to enter into a contract with the city for improvements, which consists of the construction of approximately 900 feet of 12-inch to 72-inch diameter sewers and appurtenances, and approximately 212 of that is actually in tunnel, connecting to an existing structure and junction chambers in the area. One significant structure, 120-inch diameter manhole, and 2 other significant structures. What this agreement will provide the reimbursement of the sewer construction for this particular work at a bid price of $2,956,140 to the city of Brentwood. If you're all familiar with the city of Brentwood, has a large redevelopment project along Deer Creek and Manchester Road. And there's a lot of construction going on. The district had several projects that we have in the area that we've coordinated that work with the city of Brentwood, where it allowed us to utilize their contractors And I don't know if anybody drives there recently, but they're actually shut down Manchester. So that gives us an opportunity to get work done while Manchester's shut down, so we're not inconveniencing people. So this was actually the last of several projects in your packet. There's a couple drawings. One on one side provides Sharon the one that kind of shows the overall. Show the other one first there. That shows the Brentwood bound project. That's the bounds of their particular project. Obviously goes from Hanley Road up to Brentwood Boulevard, mostly on the south side of Manchester. We've got several main sewers, one to the west, which was our CSO Mary Avenue project. And to the east, on your right-hand side is the Hampton Creek comes in there and ties into Deer Creek. Both of those are major trunk sewers coming down to the Deer Creek trunk that runs through the site. And we actually were able to get the Deer Creek trunk upsized and improved as part of this project. So on the next slide that you have kind of shows those sewers that I just talked about. Again, the CSO Mary project to the left, and then the Hampton Creek project to the right. The one that we're asking for appropriation. This is our second appropriation on Hampton Creek. We had a portion of the project done through this project actually was done by MoDOT. This particular portion is going to, or actually both pieces were done by the city of Brentwood. We came for $1 million, and then this is the remaining portion of the project to the right. But by doing this, the Brentwood's required, they're a municipal entity required to bid projects just like MSD. So they acquired bids. We reviewed the bids that they received for this particular project and agreed to move forward with them. So they'll complete this work now that the bridge is out, and it's been a good cooperating project with the city of Brentwood. So basically, we're appropriating the $3 million for the project. The agreement is already in place with the city from the previous ordinance. Any questions? All right, next item is the Lower Merrimack Wastewater Treatment Plant Expansion Phase 2 project. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the construction of the expansion, in addition to the following: influent pump station, fine screen, and washer compactor, activated sludge process, primary and secondary clarifiers, trickling filters, piping, and various other items associated with the treatment plant expansion, including work on the administration building. The purpose of this project is to increase overall plant capacity to treat future additional flows from the interim Fenton wastewater treatment facility, to improve reliability of critical aging facility assets, and to meet our future current regulatory requirements. This particular project, we're doing a tunnel from just north of this plant, which will go up and take out our Fenton wastewater treatment plant located downtown Fenton, and the flows from that plant then will come down. But what we're doing is we're increasing the capacity of this pump station to take those flows, the average daily flows and the peak flows. The other thing is you'll see a number of additional pages and projects associated. When you do a plant like this, you take the opportunity this plant's about 25 years old. We're taking the opportunity to make replace some equipment and projects. That's why there's a number of projects listed. So not only the capacity, but upgrading the facilities as well. We received 3 bids on this project. The low bid was from Plocker Construction. The bid was below our design estimate, and our appropriation for this project is the initial appropriation is $57,700,000. That's what we had planned for this current fiscal year. There'll be future appropriations in fiscal year 23 and 24, which will make our total appropriation for the project $117 million overall. And as you can see, this is just below the budget. A project of this size with the number of pieces of equipment and other items in the job to come in at budget we were really happy with. One of the things we did, and I mentioned it earlier in this project, the district did, working with my staff and our consultants, included escalation language in the contract itself, which would allow if prices go up over this 3 years, particularly on equipment or supply chain or things like that, it allows the contractor to come back to MSD and we can share and negotiate what those costs look like. And what we did is this particular escalation clause, one, there's an initial value that is borne by the contractor prior. In other words, it would have to be a certain amount before he could come back to us. Then once it reaches that point, then we look at some of the raw material escalation, CPI, some of the indexing on what those price of those materials, say steel, aluminum. I'm trying to think of all the items.
Stainless, carbon steel.
And then some of the long lead items. So that allows us to negotiate and then at that point share in the cost going.
Rich, it's also a de-escalation clause if it occurs, correct?
Absolutely. So if prices would go down over that period, which we kind of saw with lumber and things like that, then we would be looking at this on a monthly basis as to where these are at on the indices. So we were happy on this particular job to get such a good bid. Also, continuing on, this project had a MBE goal of 30%, and the contractor Blocker Construction met that goal with the subcontractors that he has listed in the project. Any questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm probably just not following the sheet. So the appropriation amount is 57 million. Is that the sum of all of the fiscal year 2022 budgeted amounts?
Correct. And then there'll be an additional appropriation similar to the trickling filter project. In other words, on these larger jobs, what we'll do is we'll fund those over several years. Rather than, Tim will go out, rather than bond, in other words, use up our bonding capacity on one project that allows us to do it over several years. So we're late in the fiscal year, so this will probably get us through fiscal year 23. So it's possibly we have money in 23 and 24 that the future funding could get pushed out a little bit. Sometimes it just depends on when we get the project out during the fire.
We've got to make sure we have the funding available for that. So it does force us to bond and do that sort of thing more quickly if we appropriate more upfront.
Did that answer your question?
It did.
All right, the next item is MCO2 Watson to Edgar Road Sanitary Relief. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. Excuse me. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 5,000 feet of sanitary sewers 8 to 36 inch in diameter. The purpose of this project is to reduce building backups and relieve overcharged sanitary sewers. The project will provide for the elimination of one constructed sanitary sewer overflow. The district received 5 bids on this project. The low bid was from Fred M. Luth and Sons. The bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation is $4 million with a future appropriation of $5.8 million in fiscal year 23, which will bring our total appropriation to $9.8 million, which is below our original budget of approximately $9.9 million. Fred M. Luth is committed to 17.31% African-American subcontractor participation with the firms listed on the detail sheet. Any questions? All right, the next item is the price to Pioneer Sanitary Relief. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 5,700 lineal feet of sanitary sewers, 8 to 30 inch in diameter and appurtenances. The purpose of this project is to reduce building backups and relieve overcharged sanitary sewers in the city of Olivet area. The district received 6 bids on this project. The low bid was from Bates Utility Incorporated. The bid was below our design estimate. Our total appropriation, which includes utility relocation and contingency costs, is $6.2 million. We'll be appropriating $4 million this year and then $2.2 in fiscal year 23. This is slightly above the budget. There was some additional footage that was added to the original scope of the project. Bates is committed to 17.17 African-American subcontractor participation with the 2 firms listed on the detail sheet. Are there any questions? All right, the next item is a construction, a bank stabilization construction project at Rico Avenue. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. Consists of the construction of approximately 700 lineal feet of natural channel stabilization appurtenances. The purpose of this project is alleviate erosion along parking lots and driveways for commercial properties on Rico Avenue, and it's in the city of Crestwood. The district received 2 bids on this project. The low bid was from Gershenson Construction. The bid was below our design estimate, and our appropriation of $350,000, which includes $50,000 for utility relocation and contingencies, is above our budget. Again, on this particular project, there was about 15% increase in the overall length of the scope of the project. Thus, we were a little bit over the budget on this project. The funds are available in the OMCI. We're doing the work. Again, Gerson Construction is committed to meeting the 17% African-American goal for this construction project with a total of 17.17% participation. All right, the next 2 items are both engineering, supplemental appropriation to engineering contracts that we already have in place. These were planned appropriations for the Lower Merrimack project. So we have a designer that we have on staff that designed that project. And then, so we're appropriating dollars for them to review material and equipment drawings and things like that that come in during the construction of the project. And the second is for the actual construction management. We use outside resources that actually are on site doing the inspection of the work and doing testings. So the first action appropriates additional fund, a plan supplemental to authorize the district to amend a contract with HDR Engineering for the construction phase services for the Lower Merrimack expansion. It's a lump sum. Obviously, you know what the project's for. I explained that earlier. The purpose of this project is to increase the overall plant capacity and treat the flows from Fenton Wastewater Treatment Plant, and again, replacing critical aging infrastructure. And again, what they'll do is they'll perform the review of shop drawings and submittals for requests for information during the project. The appropriation amount is for $1 million for this fiscal year. And that's equal to the appropriation that we had budgeted for the project. Question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
When we looked at this before, it showed the total cost at 117 million, and this says 114.
Yeah, and I caught that. Actually, both of these. The next one says it was 80 million. So there's an error on both of these. I did not catch those, and it was probably because, well, I know this one. It's possible they were written before we actually had the bids.
But it is 117.
Correct. I apologize for that. And I also caught it on the next one as well. This one here is for the construction management service. It appropriates additional funds and authorize staff to amend a construction management contract with KAI 360 for construction services. Again, enter into amendment number 1 with KAI 360 and appropriates $2 million for this project. That's equal to what we had in the budget. There was an initial appropriation of $400,000, bringing our total appropriation at this time for construction management to 2.4. And again, I apologize, it says 80,000. That was the original plant without all the other projects that we added, the smaller projects that we saw. Again, I apologize for that. KAI, and I'll hit on this a little bit, on a multi-year construction management projects, we track their overall. There's no goal for MWB participation, but we do track it. KI 360 is, if you look at the chart on the second page, they are an MBE firm, and then they're also using 2 additional firms. Their overall commitment for the project was 61%. With this amendment, they'll be at 57.42%, and there'll be future amendments since this is about a 3-year project, and we shouldn't have any problem meeting our 61% goal. Project. Any questions on those 2?
We have a general contractor overseeing the project, and then another contractor being the construction management.
That is correct. On large facility jobs, the district, our staff, we have construction inspection staff. That's fine for a lot of the open cut sewer work and force mains and even some of the smaller pump stations, but a large plant, we contract with a third party.
Okay.
In other words, we have our designer that reviews the RFI, but they're like counting, they do the MWB also, they count boots on the ground, they do material testing, they oversee the day-to-day work. Now, Alan does have a manager that oversees that contract and participates in the meetings, but they're the ones that actually have the day-to-day interactions with the contractor. This case is Blocker. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Alan. All right, the last 2 items I'll just talk about together. Back in 2019, up in North St. Louis County on Del Ridge Court, the district had a concrete stormwater channel that during a large event was washed out and took a hillside with it and almost took a home with it. And the district, in the repair of the channel, ended up purchasing 2 pieces of property. So in your packet, you'll see a picture of the channel itself and the hillside. The 3 on the left are really the damage that occurred from the storm itself. And the 2 on the right and the bottom middle are the actual fix. In other words, we had to restabilize the channel slope, and the 2 on the right are the pictures today. One of the homes, obviously the one at the top left, was in severe distress. So we purchased that property at the time, that home. And then there was an additional property that isn't showing up on these pictures to the right. If you look at the other drawing that I have, it shows the 2 properties. If you look to the left, it shows both the homes. Because of the steepness and the washout to the property on the right, we had to purchase the home on the left just to access and make the repair. So we purchased 2 homes. That project's been complete, and now there's some interest in those 2 properties, both from the city of Delwood and some of the adjacent property owners. So in order for us to accommodate those and put those on the market, the board needs to declare those surplus. And so there's a resolution for both those pieces of property coming to the board next Thursday, which would allow us then to declare those surplus and put those on the market. Obviously, both properties will be deed restricted. In other words, they won't be able to put homes back on there. So either be a pocket park or yard for the 2 adjacent properties. And then also we'll maintain access with easement to the channel for future maintenance. Any questions on that? That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. There's no other business. Next meeting is tentatively scheduled for May 31st, 2022. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second. This is the 278th meeting of the Finance Committee. Can I please have roll call?
And we'll note that all trustees are present with Trustee Wabi online.
All right. Motion for approval of the committee meeting minutes from April 5th, please.
So moved. Second.
Minutes are approved. I have no comments, so we'll move on to Tim for this lengthy agenda.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
We'll start with the portfolio review, the monthly grid that we look at. Just going through our operating funds. Started in the upper left, the portfolio is down about $8 million from last month in May. We're going to see a drop because we have debt service payments, and then we should see an uptick again in June due to a debt issuance that we're going to talk about. Yield to maturity is up only 5 basis points, while the benchmark's up 30. Again, market rates go faster because the whole portfolio turns over, just a small portion of ours, so we're moving a bit more slowly. We do on the way down as well. Sector allocation, there are not any big changes, but we are in compliance with our policy. Fund summary at the bottom, there's nothing real big to point out there except the debt project funds in the portfolio are getting low, which is why we're going to be asking for authority to issue more bonds. And debt service reserve funds, which are usually pretty stable, we should see a slight decline due to a refunding. We'll be able to release some of the reserves. Our old bonds were issued with a reserve set aside to protect bondholders, but we have so much cash, our credit quality is so high. Those aren't features in the market right now on new bonds, and so we can get rid of some of that as we refund some of the old debt. Maturity distribution is not a big change, although we probably have a little bit more than we've had in the 0 to 1 years. And when we issue bonds, we'll probably see an increase on that side and in the 1 to 2 years. Any questions on the operating fund portfolio? All right, with that, I will move to the 2022 B Bond Ordinance. I've got Jason Terry from Gilmore and Bell, our bond counsel here. He's not been here probably for a couple of years because of COVID, so I know he is itching to talk about security laws in great detail. I did not say that to discourage questions, but you've been warned. We'll start with the presentation, just give you a quick update on the upcoming bond issuance. This first page is not any different than what I showed last month. So we're anticipating about $100 million of new money. Rates continue to be volatile, they continue to increase, but we do expect higher rates later in the year. Originally, this was planned probably for December issuance. We've moved it up just to try to hit rates before they go even higher. The underwriting team, we pitched and was approved last month. And this bond issuance will be an intro and adopt at next week's meeting. Next slide, just talk a little bit about the current conditions. Because rates have gone up so much, we're actually probably going to reduce the refunding. Some of the amounts that we were going to refund are there's no longer a savings. And so what we do plan to refund, the savings has shrunk a little bit. So we only are looking at an expected savings of a few $100,000 at this point. The biggest reason for that is that some of the outstanding series from the 2012 bonds that we were refunding were sold to retail investors, so they have much lower coupons, like 2.75 or 3%. We still have some 4 and 5% coupons where we still have some savings. So that's something we'll continue to monitor. As we get closer, if those savings disappear, we actually will not refund. But as of now, we're planning to refund a little bit, probably about $9.5 million instead of $14 million is where that is. New money, still looking at $100 million of par. The premium amount for that, since we generally issue at coupons higher than market because that's what municipal investors want, that's the market. We get a premium, so you get more proceeds than the par. So the best way to think about premium is you get extra money above and beyond the par. Instead of paying that back through principal payments, you're essentially paying it back through a little bit higher interest rate. But 30-year level debt service, true interest cost looks like it'd be around 4% now, which is quite a bit higher than where we've issued the last few years, but from a historical basis, it is still not a high rate. And we'll look at rates in just a second. But these bonds are not going to be structured any differently than our other senior bonds have been. Covenants are the same. The warranties and representations we make to investors are going to be the same. So these bonds are not unusual in any way. The next page I want to look at is exhibit. I'm sorry, can you go back one? I think we had an exhibit F. Okay. All right, you know, go to the next. Maybe exhibit F is after. Okay, I got my pages out of order. You can go back. I'm sorry, you can go back one more, Stephanie. That was my fault. So this page, I just want to show you rates really fast. Last month, we looked at rates current versus 3 months ago. At the beginning of the year, rates were below that black line, which is the average of the rates the last 5 years. Last month, they were at that dotted blue line. Now they're at that solid blue line. So rates are, and think of that gray cloud as the range of rates over the last 5 years. So rates currently are getting near the top of where they've been the last 5 years. Now, the last 5 years has been an historical low rate environment. So while these rates are high compared to where they've been the last 5 years, they're still not what we would call high rates, just higher than what we've seen lately. And we still think it's a good time to go out and get this money for the capital program. All right, now next slide. Thank you. All right, Exhibit F. This is the parameters exhibit from the bond ordinance. And so when we ask you for bond authorization, we usually ask you to approve parameters within which we'll issue the bonds. These tend to be wider than where we expect, just so that there's flexibility in case rates move because we need your approval. If we tried to cut it right at exactly where we thought rates would be today and they moved, then we'd have to come back to you. So that's why we asked for the parameters. So we are asking for original principal amount not to exceed 115 million. As I said, the plan is to go out for 100 million. Purchase price no less than 98.5%. At this point, we think there'll be a premium, so they'll probably be sold at closer to 110 to 115%. True interest cost, this is pretty wide. It says not to exceed 5.5. Right now, they're at 4. I do not expect them to get to 5.5. I talked our municipal advisor down from 6 on this, but this is still pretty wide. You shouldn't think of this as we'll just let anything go. We have municipal advisors who are fiduciaries. They monitor the market regularly, and they will come back after this bond is issued and tell you that they did everything they could to get the best rate in the market. And so, and they'll sign a certificate saying that the rates we get are fair. So we're not going to be issuing unless rates really move at 5.5%. Cost of issuance not to exceed 1% of original principal amount, excluding the underwriter's discount, is probably looking, now we have a lot of the cost set. It looks like it'd be roughly half of that. Final maturity, these will be 30-year bonds with a 10-year par call, which is normal. And then on the refunding side, we would expect not less than 0.5% of the par amount of the bonds. Typically, we're looking at something much greater, but these are current refinancings. So any savings we get, we would take advantage of. Any questions about the bond ordinance?
Tim,
Yes.
are you expecting these to all go institutional, or do you have a retail?
We will have a retail order period. So typically what we do is we have a retail order period, and then we go to the institutional investors afterwards. So we give retail a first shot. And then when we come back and present the results to you, we will let you know how much went retail and how much went institutional.
And then, I'm sorry, I'm sure you mentioned this. Who's the lead underwriter?
Bank of America.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, Trustee Wabi. Anything you want to add?
No, I don't.
I waited 2 years.
I know. I love to hear myself talk, but I have nothing to say.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Then I am going to move on to the next items. You are free to go.
Okay.
And that'll clear room for Marion, who I know has some things coming up. But before Marion, I'd have 2 more items. They're kind of combined into one here. So we've recently done RFPs for bond counsel and disclosure counsel. And so I want to just walk through those findings and recommendation with you, because we will have ordinances at the next board meeting for these. So next slide, bond counsel services. Jason from Gilmore and Bell is our current bond counsel. So the way the bond counsel interacts with us is they really represent us in all of our bond transactions. They're in charge of a lot of the paperwork. And there are thousands and thousands of pages of paperwork. They help us with the ballot requirements and language for the bond authorizations. We render legal opinions on the bonds. Since we issue tax-exempt bonds, that is important for the investors. And then they give us a lot of advice and counsel on continuance compliance with securities laws, with tax laws and other applicable laws. They help us think through possible changes that we see in federal and state legislation. So I talk to Gilmore and Bell as much or more than I talk to our municipal advisor. So we have a constant back and forth, or any bond counsel. Disclosure counsel services on the next page is we kind of do these RFPs together because sometimes firms bid on both of them. Disclosure counsel service really is responsible for drafting the offering documents that we issue that we put out in front of the bond market when we're selling bonds. They do prepare some certificates and review some other documents, but they lead. Right now, we're having regular discussions as we go through and review some of the documents that will be used to market the bonds. So the Disclosure Council leads that, provides us advice on things that should be in that, and really works between us and the underwriting team to make sure that the offering documents are complete. So that's Disclosure Council services. So we sent this RFP, it was one RFP, to 76 firms, it looks like. We received 4 qualified responses. The fees on these services are typically paid from bond proceeds. They're not typically budgeted, they come from the bond proceeds. However, they would then reduce the amount of bond proceeds available from projects. And we receive a broad range typically, and this was no different, of fees depending on if it's a subordinated bond or a senior bond, whether it's subordinated meaning the state revolving fund bond. So on the disclosure council side, the fees range from $20,000 to $75,000 per bond issuance, again, depending on size and type of bond. So that's not really that unusual of a range. In bond council, we saw ranges from $30,000 to $110,000 per issuance, roughly, per issuance of $100 million or less. A little bit less than that on the front end if it was an SRF bond. And again, that depends on the size of the bond and the type of the bond, the complexity of the bond. So the range is, the fees we pay are really dependent on a lot of different variables. So it's hard to, so what we did was we scored these based on what we plan to issue, which is a lot of SRF, not as much senior bonds over the next few years. The valuation team was myself, Susan Myers, General Counsel, and then John Stroman, our Assistant Secretary Treasurer. The next page, we'll just look at the scoring, starting with the disclosure proposal. So what we looked at was experience and reliability of the firm, how much experience they have in these matters, the responsiveness of the RFP, how well they describe their plan to help us meet our goals and to provide the services. Cost is a factor, although expertise is more important, so cost is not weighted that highly. Again, references, so this is very similar to what you saw earlier in the other RFP that I presented. So on the disclosure proposal, Armstrong Teasdale is who's a large local firm. They do have expertise though in this area. And they also are currently our disclosure counsel. They won the last RFP. Oh, that was a new relationship for us on the disclosure counsel side. They are also the lowest cost provider. The lowest cost provider, very capable firm. If you look at through these firms, Gilmore and Bell does well in these services. Thompson Coburn, another big firm, offers these services. Salisbury and Associates, a much smaller firm, not as much depth, but also a capable provider. When you see these, this is just a ranking, so you should, when you see 1 versus 4, you shouldn't think that 4 means it was a bad proposal. It just means that compared to the other proposals, it was lower, but that doesn't mean that they're not a capable firm. So when you add in the scores, then you look at the workforce multiplier as well. Armstrong Teasdale is our recommendation for disclosure counsel. So our recommendation is to retain Armstrong Teasdale. If you go down to bond counsel proposal, same firms. This time Gilmore and Bell, who scored highest on experience, reliability, and responsiveness. They've actually been our bond counsel since we've been issuing bonds. They were one of the lower cost providers as well. They are the lowest cost provider on the SRF, which is expected to make up the most of our issuance. The next few years, they also received a workforce multiplier, and overall they are the number ranked firm from the RFP. They also have added a WMB sub to their proposal as well, which we'll talk about just a second. So on the next slide, just a little bit background on the firms. Armstrong Teasdale, as I said, has served as our disclosure counsel for the last 5 years. Obviously, they're a large firm. They do have a significant St. Louis presence. We are covered out of St. Louis office, and they've done a good job for us in the last few years. So we are happy to recommend that we retain them as disclosure counsel. Gilmore and Bell has been our bond counsel since 2004. They have a national reputation. So all these other firms are large, provide a lot of different services. Gilmore and Bell is really focused in this area. They are one of the nation's leading providers of these kind of services. Very strong reputation in taxes and bond financing. Like I said, one of the largest public finance practices in the country. They have full-time public finance tax attorneys, which is unusual, and great securities laws expertise. They also have strong St. Louis presence. Jason works just down the street, really. Gilmore and Bell also represents the state on SRF funds. They work with a lot of local schools and municipalities, so very strong presence in St. Louis. White Coleman and Associates is the WMB contractor. It's a 70-30 split on costs on the work that they do. Don't have a lot on them here, but they've been a WMB provider with you for as long as I've been here. I'm not sure if all the way back to 2004. Okay, so for most of the time. So we have good experience with them. And they do a good job as well. So those are both ordinances. There'll be separate ordinances because we have separate firms for the different services provided. Are there any questions about disclosure or bond counsel, the RFP process, the firms, or the services?
So these are just flat fees, right, per issuance, and then it's the bids that we received are just estimates.
The bids are estimates, so they're typically, so generally speaking, it's a fee for, there's different fee structures for each kind of debt. So let's just look at SRF and the capital markets issuance. There's typically escalation on the size of the amount too. So there's like a base cost and then a proration as the amount of the bonds go up. So when you think about bonds, the higher the bond amount that you issue, the more liability there might be for the law firm that's providing an opinion. At least that's what they all say.
That makes sense to me.
Okay. Okay, good. You're the expert, so that makes me feel better.
I get it.
Any other questions? Okay, with that then, I will turn it over to Marion for the rest of the agenda.
All right, thank you, Tim. So the first item I'd like to cover is our financial status report update. So you should see a document in your packet that's labeled Finance Key Performance Indicators for FY22 with 4 graphs on it. So I'd like to start with the graph in the top right-hand corner of the chart that's labeled Budget Status Budget Status Forecast. This is through March of 2022. This particular chart reflects that our user charge revenues are projected to be about $10.9 million above budget through FY22, and that's primarily due to increases that we're seeing in both our commercial and residential consumption classes. Just to kind of give you an idea of where this compared prior to the pandemic, we're kind of right at that level. So the number of CCFs, which are billable units that we billed through March of 2020 was right at 37 million CCFs. This particular billing through 2022 is about 36.1 million CCFs, so it's about a 3% difference. So we are seeing improvements in terms of our usage, returning back to pre-pandemic levels. We did adjust our budget. When we did the FY22 budget, we lowered our expectations in terms of billable units. So we took a conservative approach, and we, again, are projecting that our user charge revenues will exceed our budget expectations. So moving to the lower right-hand corner of the chart, I'm sorry, I talked about user charges in the top right-hand corner. I'd like to go to the top left-hand corner of the chart. This compares the budget versus the actual results for the district's debt service, operating expenses, and our capital program. Our total budget variance is projected to be about $34 million favorable. Our debt service is projected to be about $1.2 million favorable, again, meaning that we're projected to be below budget expectations. Our operating expenses are projected to be $10.2 million favorable. And the largest driver of this favorable budget variance is our capital expenditures. They are projected to be about $22.4 million favorable, of which about $10 million of that is actual program savings, and the remaining $12.4 million is due to projects that we're not going to do this fiscal year, but will be moved into a subsequent budget period. So moving to the lower right-hand corner of the chart, this chart reflects our delinquencies and our average collection period. So the graph depicts that our average collection period is about 52 days. Our collection period has remained relatively flat at about 57 days since 2016, but we are seeing an improvement in FY22. And I'm not sure if that's related to the additional federal programs that some of our customers have participated in that have allowed them to pay off some delinquent debt, but we are seeing improvement in this area. Our total delinquencies thus far for fiscal year 22 is about $4.6 million. That's a little less than what we see. Typically, we're in the $4.5 to $5 million range. Finally, in the lower left-hand corner of the graph, this depicts the district's debt service coverage, which is the ratio of revenues available to pay principal and interest on borrowed funds. This depicts that we're exceeding both our requirements and our targets for our senior bonds and all of our debt obligations. So we're in good shape there. Are there any questions about this particular document that I can answer? Okay, if not, I will move on to the next item. As required by our wastewater ordinance, we are required to update the board on any adjustments to accounts that exceed $5,000. So I'm going to review the quarter from January through the end of March of 2022. So the grand total for adjustments during this quarter was about $198,000. We had about 33 adjustments that totaled that $198,000. So moving up to the top section of the document, which shows the adjustments, there were 29 adjustments, which totaled $166,000. The majority of that consisted of water off adjustments of about $72,000. That's information that we received from the water utilities. They inform us that an account's or residence water or business water has been shut off. So we have to go back sometimes and make adjustments retroactively because we obviously shouldn't bill them for sewer. We also had some reduction factor adjustments, which totaled about $61,000. Those adjustments are adjustments that our DEC department makes based on the strength of the wastewater discharge at an industry. So we will go and do a study, and if that strength increases, we bill more. If it decreases, then we give adjustments out. So for this quarter, we gave adjustments out, which totaled about $61,000. We had some other adjustments that were due to some encoding errors or refunds that we had to issue, which totaled about $59,000. Moving down to the second section, which are write-offs that we had to make. And these are typically due to properties that have been sold at sheriff's sales, or they've been transferred to the LRA, which is Land Bank here in St. Louis. When that occurs, we make adjustments to the accounts. So we had 4 adjustments totaling $32,000 in this particular category. And then finally, in the last section at the bottom of the page there, these aren't really adjustments, they're actual billings that we do, but we run them through the billing system as adjustments. So we billed both Bridgeton and Missouri American Water $612,000 during this period of time. Are there any questions regarding the adjustments? Okay, thank you. I will move to the next item. So the district uses, actually, Stephanie, if you go back one, you should see a document which relates to the rate design and debt feasibility study. Yeah, thank you. It's that one. So the district uses a firm for both rate commission consulting and debt feasibility studies. We issued an RFP earlier this year. We got 3 responses in, and the bids ranged from about $155,000 a year to about $216,000 a year. This particular action is necessary, as I indicated. We acquire professional services for both rate modeling support, rate proposal preparation, and expert testimony before the rate commission. So when we go to the rate commission, this firm assists us with the rate modeling and provides testimony that we need with respect to the proposed rate structure. They also prepare feasibility studies that are required. Anytime we issue bonds, there's a study that's required to be included in our offering documents. And so this firm performs that work for us too. So as a result of our evaluation of the 3 bids that we received, we are recommending that the district retain Raftellus Financial Consulting. They have worked with the district previously. They were the lowest bid. They also received diversity multiplier as a result of their workforce composition. This is a 1-year contract with the option to renew for 4 additional years. So again, our recommendation is that we award a contract to Raftellus. We would like to take this to the Board of Trustees at the next meeting for introduction. Are there any questions about this particular item? Okay, thank you. Okay, now for the interesting part of the meeting. I will talk about changes to our preliminary budget. So there should be a presentation in your package. If you go to the second slide there. So the numbers that are you see in red font are changes that were made from the preliminary budget. So when I talked to you in April, we were forecasting district revenues of $834 million roughly. But as we always do, we go back and review adjustments in between that preliminary budget and now. And so what we're seeing is that we're going to issue about $111 million less in revenue bonds in FY23. That's primarily due to the fact that we were initially anticipating doing this in FY23, but Tim has accelerated that borrowing, so it will carry in FY22 as he described earlier. As a result of that, we've lowered our revenue bond forecast, and also we've reduced the amount that we were going to transfer to fund balance from $256 million to about $156 million. If you look over at the expense side, our projected capital budget has also decreased by roughly $13.3 million. And you also see an increase in debt service that's going up by about $2.6 million. But again, our total district expenses were reduced by about $11 million. So we do have a balanced budget that we will be proposing at $823 million. Going on to the next slide. So again, this graph here just shows you the differences that I previously discussed from the changes in the revenue projections that were in the preliminary budget versus what we are bringing to you now, again, $823 million. And it also shows the changes in the total expenses. You'll go to the next slide. You can skip this one and go to the next one. So as is typical, we make changes to our capital program. So I'll just go to the basically the total. So what we're seeing in terms of total appropriations, when we prepared the preliminary budget, there were 135 projects included. With this budget, we revised it to 134 projects for a net change of 1. But the cost has actually decreased by $13.3 million. There's also a general fund project that will remain. That's $1.5 million. So I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes here talking about the schedule. So if you'll move to the next slide, Stephanie. Thank you. So again, the budget will be introduced during the Board of Trustees meeting on May the 12th. We do have a public hearing, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. That's related to our, we'll provide information on the capital project, our rates, and our taxes as well. And then we hope to bring the budget to you on June the 9th for adoption. So that's kind of the remaining steps in the budgeting process. Okay, so if there are no questions, I'll move on to the next item, which is our budget ordinance. So again, this ordinance will be introduced on May the 12th. It will authorize the district to expend funds during FY23 for wastewater and stormwater operations. The requested appropriations total $404.3 million, which is the total of our debt service and our operating budget. And they're listed by fund at the bottom of the page there. They match the amount of our operating budget and our debt service amounts I previously discussed in the presentation a moment ago. Any request for capital budget appropriations will be brought to the board throughout the year as we customarily do as funding is needed for the project. So any questions regarding the budget ordinance? Okay. The next thing I'd like to talk about is our, yes.
Marion, do we maintain a contingency in our budget?
We do have reserve requirements that are built into the budget for both stormwater and for wastewater.
But I mean, like an operating, that means like an operating reserve that we set aside for unanticipated circumstances?
That is correct.
Okay, and how big is that?
Typically, for our stormwater budget, what we try to do is, I think we have, it's about 6 months worth of reserves in the stormwater budget, and in the wastewater budget, typically, I think we're at around 16% of whatever that budgeted amount is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any additional questions? Okay, I will move on to the last item that I have on the agenda, which is the tax ordinance. So this particular ordinance complies with the district's charter and is part of our annual budgeting process. The board will be requested to approve the tax rates that are reflected on this particular page. As you'll see, we have a 2 cent, and we refer to it as a 2 cent and a 10 cent tax rate. The 2 cent rate is for regulatory matters that we have to address as part of the stormwater business unit. And then we also have a 10 cent tax, which funds the operations. Those two items together total about $35.4 million. If you'll move to the next slide. So these are our recommended tax rates for our OMCIs, which are special districts. These communities have requested that we charge an additional tax, which will be used within these particular service districts to perform stormwater projects and other stormwater related matters. The total is about, if you'll scroll down a little bit, I think it's about $9.8 million. So in total, the amount of taxes that we're requesting is approximately $44 million. There is, as part of our May 12th budget hearing, there will be a finding of facts committee, which will be asked to review these tax rates to determine if they're appropriate. I did send information to the trustees that have volunteered to serve on that committee, which describes the purpose of the taxes, the amounts that we're asking you to approve. And if there are any questions between now and that budget hearing, please reach out to me and make sure we get you the information that you need. Prior to the public hearing, I will very quickly kind of go over that process with you again, just to make sure that you understand what we're asking you to do. But certainly if you have questions, please let me know. So that concludes the items that I have on the agenda. Are there any questions regarding the tax ordinance?
I have a question. Is there a change in the amount of the tax year over year, or is it the same?
What we do is, to answer your question, yes, there typically is a change. So what we bring to the board as part of the budgeting process, unless there are assessments done in a tax year. We use the previous year's rates as our estimates, but we always come back in September because we get changes from the assessor's offices between the time you approve the budget and when we have to file the taxes in October. And we have to go through a calculation that's prescribed by the state auditor's office. And there are a number of factors that we have to look at. That process actually determines the final tax rates. So we hold a special meeting in September in which we ask you to approve the final tax rates.
Do we know what the change is?
No, not right now, because we get that information over the summer. Typically, we get it about probably late August or so. So we have about 3 weeks to do those calculations and then get that information to you for that special board meeting in time for us to remit it to the auditor's office.
With those adjustments we have to make, these tax rates are set at the maximum rate we can for each one of the categories. They're just adjusted as Marion had described, so. For the ones that are being charged.
And it's not really discretionary, it's done by mathematical computation.
Correct. We can always opt to reduce that tax rate. So you can do a voluntary reduction, but you have to be careful when you do that, because if you do a voluntary reduction, it restricts the amounts going forward in the next years that you're able to request.
But Marion, we do have that on the OMCIs that are shown with a zero rate. That's where we voluntarily lowered those to zero.
That is correct. And I should point out, we are reinstating one of the OMCIs, Gravois Creek, this year. We're reinstating that particular tax. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Marion. Thank you, Tim. If there's no other business, the next tentative meeting is May 31st, 2022. We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Everyone,
Trustee Fair stepped out for just.
wait, let's wait for a couple of minutes.
In March of this year, the Department of Homeland Security legislation, the act from 2002 was amended that requires critical infrastructure to report within 72 hours a cyber incident. This is important stuff because if you think about the incidents that occurred last year, those are all independent, and some of them make the news, some of them don't. Depends on the dollar amount and the impact. But if we, as a as a country, want to determine if you can have hundreds of locations being hit by the same thing, so we can have a more of a coordinated effort to understand what the overall impact is. Next up, the EPA, along with Water, ISAC. ISAC is Information Sharing and Analysis Center. It is a nonprofit collaboration of water utilities, and we talk about security and share best practices. They came out in February this year and sent us this warning that said, you're under potential cyber threats. I'm sure you've heard this in the news. It's primarily due to the geopolitical tension on because of the war in Russia. So these are the recommendations. There were 8 recommendations that were issued. This is the area where I want to illustrate to you, where we stand as far as if these are the best practices, the best standards put in place, and how we've reacted to that. First up is the requirement for strong and unique passwords. That means that they have a long length and they're complex. We had done that already in 2020. So trying to be ahead of the curve, understanding that those are, passwords are the things that are breached, and that's how bad actors get into the systems. Next up is the implementation of multi-factor authentication. You're probably familiar with this when you log into your banks. You have a second authentication method. That's your phone. It's something that that a bad actor or criminal doesn't necessarily have on them. So we implemented that in June of 2020. Next up is to address known exploited vulnerabilities. What that means is to look at all of your systems. We have tools that scan our systems and tell us what items are vulnerable. And because there are excessive amount of vulnerabilities that are out there, it depends on the application, the OS level, network, server, even Wi-Fi access, those vulnerabilities. So last year, IT implemented and we adopted something called N-1. And what we said was our systems will be on a supported version or a prior supported version. That's how you stay ahead of the curve with your applications and your operating systems. The older a operating system or an application is, the more vulnerable it is because it's been out there longer and the criminals are out there and hackers determining how to exploit those systems. So we adopted that policy. We are currently measuring that. It's not an easy thing to attain because it takes constant updating, and sometimes you run into a patch you put in causes some problems. But we've accelerated that. We've taken that stand to protect the district from any disruption in service. Next up, there's an item. It's called surge support. Really what that says, what the EPA and Water ISAC said, it was put all hands on deck. So there's probably lots of different flavors of that. What we did was look at that and said, where are our gaps in monitoring? You can have your systems monitored, but are there gaps in that? And we identified that over the weekends and over the evenings, we had alerting, but we didn't have really people. We didn't have active people looking at the alerts and tying things together and determining that there might be issues. So we enlisted services from our partner, Regis. They also do our data center co-location to do after hours and evening cyber response for us, so that they will analyze it and then alert us of incident. Next up is network systems awareness. So what does that mean? It's really, do you know what's going on in your network? You've read some of the articles about the cybersecurity threats and the incidents that occur. They're not in your system and then in 24 hours they're taking it over. They can be there for 6 months. They're in there slowly getting into your system, slowly finding vulnerabilities until they finally can unleash code and encrypt or take your systems down. So what we did, we've implemented something called IDS. It's called Intrusion Detection. And what that does, those are security applications that look at the activity on your network and determine when there might be something suspicious. Just like for a patient might have normal monitoring of heart rate and pulse and things like that. Your network, believe it or not, kind of has this normal activity. We open up at 6:30 in the morning. There's this flush of activity for Maximo, for the work orders, things go on. These applications, and there's artificial intelligence embedded in these as well to look for those anomalies, something that we couldn't determine otherwise, and it'll bring it to light for us and say, hey, this looks suspicious. There's a large amount of data moving from this server to this IP address, and that doesn't normally. So we implemented that in January of this year. Next up, backing up data. That seems, that's decades old. Everybody should back up your data. But we took it a step further. We have backups in place, absolutely. But what disaster recovery did for us is, if you think about recovering from disaster, your data center is no longer available. All of your databases are unavailable. You can't get to them. You have to replicate that data consistently and timely to another location. So that's what we did with disaster recovery. All the data that was on-prem at our regular data center is now at our disaster recovery site. So if it all ransomware came in, encrypted it all, we couldn't get to it, we have a second set of it at our disaster recovery site. So that's why I want to talk about disaster recovery today, because that is a significant step up for us. It would help us to recover. It's not a fail-safe. There's other things we have to do because the cyber criminals know how to take care of your on-prem data and your replicated data. But that's a significant step for us, and we have other guards in place to take care of that. Item number 7, incident response plans. This is it's important that we practice if an incident occurs, what we're going to do. Who do we escalate to? Who do we notify? How do we triage? You can do things like turn off servers. You can turn off an endpoint, someone's computer that's infected. We can take it off the network. We have our security team practice that. We don't practice that, then it's kind of just a, do what you can as fast as you can. So we practiced that. We did that in April of this year. We had a desktop exercise for that, and we simulated 3 different incidents. We didn't tell our security guys what they were, and they had to work through and come up with that evidence. So we're doing that so we're prepared so that we don't have any missteps. And our cyber insurance carriers require that we, at some point in that, when we think something's going on, that we contact them. And then finally, manual operations should be in place. Well, our district emergency operating procedures, that's what that's for. That says if you don't have your IT systems, how are you going to function in a manual? So, any questions on that?
One question real quick. I know on the incident reporting, Critical Infrastructure Act, under is there a distribution of those reports to the appropriate community that we would be a part of? I'm assuming that one of the incident response plans,
yes,
whatever we're doing in that area, we kind of got our ear to the wall. We're reporting if we have it because we're required to, but if someone reports it, if there is an incident, does that get broadcast in any fashion
to the Board of Trustees?
To the community that they say the infrastructure community.
It is within IT.
Has there been anything in the last couple of months related that might be related to any incident related situation in the Ukraine?
No, sir.
Just curious.
No problem. You would, yeah.
And you may not be able to tell me, but
no, you would know about it. So our incident response plan consists of, first of all, get IT engaged, get cyber insurance engaged, get our director, and then it would be our executive director and the directors, and certainly then the trustees would be involved and notified that's happening, because, if there's a breach, then it gets in the news, and then we have to buy insurance for everybody if it's a data breach or something like that.
Water ISIC belong to reporting requirements. They send out dates on a regular basis. Water ISIC that we belong to, the water infrastructure and plan. So that organization, that nonprofit, they send out updates from all the water wastewater industries incidents.
Okay. Oh, are you familiar with FirstNet?
Correct. Yes, AT&T's FirstNet.
Right.
Yes.
Are we looking at
Yes,
being
we are.
involved, using that facility in any way?
Yes, we're in discussions with operations. Yes.
Could you kind of keep us informed as to
sure
when they accept you and how we plan to use it?
Yeah, we're doing a test right now, and there's a number of us with FirstNet. In fact, with number IT, I'm on FirstNet, AT&T's FirstNet right now, and we're doing a test on it right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Can I ask a question then, just like probe a little further on this? New information was received regarding a potential cyber threat. What information was received?
It was information that the EPA and Water ISAC received. I guess that's input from utilities that they were under attack. When we talk about information like that, so on our firewalls, we can tell whether or not it's coming from Russia, it's coming from China, things like that. So I think it was a collection of that information that said, hey, they're going after our utilities.
Addresses from foreign countries like Russia, so they cannot get into our system. So we actually have geofence through our firewall to exclude everybody, but that's maybe India and America, North America, correct? So that helps protect us.
Is there any news that you've heard that you have questions about that you think impact the district? These were just the pieces that I selected. Okay, so we'll go on next up for so what is our security rating? So how are we doing? We're listening to those things in the news and we're getting prepared for it, but how are we doing? So let's talk about a security rating. We subscribe to an application that does security ratings for businesses and banks that can actually look at your infrastructure over the intranet like a cyber criminal or hacker would. Because once you're on the public intranet, it's highly visible, and it's visible in many ways. So anytime you have communication that goes out, you can detect that that's MSD. Here's the DNS records, etc. So this company is able to glean that information from our presence on the internet, and then they take it and they create a score that shows where you lie as far as being secure. So there's 3 ratings: basic, intermediate, and advanced. You can look at this like a credit score. So really, what is that made up of, and how do they possibly do this? There's really 3 main categories. One is user behavior. That's whether or not any users have their credentials actually compromised and they're for sale on the dark web. We get that information out of the system. Diligence. What do we do? IT as an organization, what are we doing to protect? There are a number of things, especially on the firewall. As John mentioned, geofencing means you don't accept an access request from anywhere outside of the United States, because we don't have business outside of the United States. Compromised systems, that's when our systems, a server, an endpoint, a person's laptop, goes out to the internet, the operating system can be detected. Even if they're using their cell phone, you can tell what browser they're using, etc. So a more detailed look at that is, and I'm not going to go through these, but whether or not there's been any botnet infections. Here's your user behavior. Is there file sharing that's going on that's not detected, public disclosures, whether or not we've had to publicly disclose a breach. And then these are the diligence factors. I blocked some of these out because we don't have A's on them. I don't want to give anybody any insight into what's going on our systems because this is publicly available. So that's kind of the security rating. So next question is, so what is our security rating? We currently are at 740. You look at that in the terms of basic, intermediate, and advanced. We are on just the entry point for advanced. You look on this map here, you will see back in May we began our engagement with this BitSite company, and in October of 2021 we were at a high point of 770, and you'll see some downturns here as the year progressed. And I can tell you this is really just the nature of security. You are in perfect shape today, but tomorrow someone finds a vulnerability. And you have to then react to that, patch that as fast as you can, or update your application as fast as you can. And we need to balance that against whether or not we're going to impact the district and there's the systems that are functioning. How often can we take them down and put them back up and put in new applications and not avoid outages or try to avoid outages?
Basically, you're saying that the fact that our rating has lowered is not because we've gotten worse. It's because the crooks have gotten better.
Thank you. It's the nature of the
And
beast.
we have to keep up with it.
You got it. So presently we're at 740. And we still strive every day to look, and we take the reports from the system and do everything we can to keep us in a safe, secure place. You'll notice this blue are the shaded area. That is the utility industry's range. If you can look at us compared to the range, of utility industry people, you'll see that we're primarily at the top, or at least the second half in that advanced area. So that's good. That's a good sign. At least we feel like it is. Any questions there? Okay. So finally, I want to talk about disaster recovery. I already mentioned that it's critical to recovery from ransomware. Not necessarily a fail-safe, but it gives us a leg up because we have another set of data to recover from. I want to give you a little history. It was a 5-year journey, a significant amount of work, and we've been in front of the board asking for financing for our disaster recovery site, et cetera. So back in 2018, it got on the strategic business plan for the district. In 2019, that project got kicked off. Those tiers that Todd talked about earlier, the critical applications are in tier 1 and the somewhat less critical in tier 2. That happened in 2019. 2020, this was a significant effort was done to go out and look at all of the offerings for disaster recovery. It can be very expensive. If you think about it, you're taking your data center as is, which is a multi-million-dollar investment, and you want to replicate it. So we looked at that and we said, what's really the cost to value? What's the best option for us? Because you have to put in your firewalls, your routers, your servers, duplicate your server infrastructure. But we came up with a good solution. We partnered with Regis again, who provides us with a really value add services. And so we have a disaster recovery site. It's physically somewhere else. I don't want to divulge it here, but I can if you have questions about it. It's an interesting collection, but it certainly was a lot of budget planning and a lot of technical planning. So in 2021, all of last year, the disaster recovery site infrastructure was built out. That means we bought servers, we bought firewalls, we bought network equipment, put them in racks, cabled them together, created a network, created this entity to duplicate on a smaller scale our data center, our systems. And then we did preliminary testing. We did things like, can we recover a database? Can we access it securely? Are the firewalls rules in place, et cetera? And then in 2022, And this was really very timely for that audit, came after we did our exercise at the end of February. It was completed. And so the recommendation that came from that audit that said the business needs to be involved in the testing, we planned it intentionally like that to do that first exercise with IT doing it, because we didn't want to invite the business and say, oh, hold on, we found a problem, we got to fix it, come back and test again. That's why our next exercise in the fall of this year will be, here's our simulated disaster, we're going to recover, okay, just like we would in a real disaster, say, okay, business stakeholders, can you please test and tell us if the functionality is there, and see if we're ready for prime time so we can turn this on for the use by the district. Any questions there? Okay, that's all that I have.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we can move on to item 5. In any case, Tracy, you have the,
Yeah, trustees, I'll be discussing the liability insurances for the district. If you would take a moment and pull out the large spreadsheet that I gave you. I have 19 insurances that I'll go over, and sometimes it's just easier to be able to compare and look at the insurances on the spreadsheet. We're going to start with ordinance number 15908 at the top of the spreadsheet for the property and boiler insurance. This insurance carrier is with FM Global, and what it covers is physical damage to any of our buildings and the contents of those buildings. It also covers business income and has a layer of cyber insurance associated with it as well. It does exclude any flood, nuclear attacks, war, or pollution claims it would have. This is for $1 billion worth of insurance. And there was a mandatory increase in our deductible, so it went from $100,000 to $250,000. That insurance has gone down in cost due to the raise in deductible. The next insurance is ordinance number 15909, which is the excess flood and earthquake insurance. That is also with FM Global Insurance Company. And that policy covers any physical damages to building and contents by flood. It's for all of our locations, and it does exclude any physical damage that will be covered by the previous insurance that I just mentioned. This is for $30 million worth of insurance. The cost of this has also gone down a little bit as well, and now we'll be paying $1,350,943 for that insurance. The next insurance is for ordinance number 15910, which is our combined liability. There are 3 layers of that insurance, starting with the general liability. It's with MOPERM. This insurance covers liability claims against property, bodily injury, and if MSD is found to be negligent in any of these particular items that I just named. It does exclude nuclear attack, war, pollution, and intentional criminal acts. This insurance is for $2 million per occurrence with a $100,000 deductible. The insurance went up in cost, and all of MOPERM is just kind of going up because MOPERM also covers a lot of the police claims, any of the other public entity claims that have had quite a few charges against them. So that's why it continues to go up right now. But that insurance has gone up, and it's $431,000 for the first layer, $672. The next layer of our combined liability is for the management and benefit plan administration. This insurance covers any claims or suits made against the board, employees due to wrongful acts of error and omission. It excludes nuclear attacks, war, pollution, and intentional criminal acts. This insurance is also for $2 million with a $100,000 retention. The cost of this insurance has gone up slightly, and it's $89,470. Excuse me, I said $89,000. $89,470. The last layer of our combined liability is for employment practice liability. It's also with MOPERM. The policy is going to cover any claims or suits made against MSD, the members, and our members and employees due to any employment practice, wrongful termination, discrimination. It excludes nuclear attack, war, pollution, and intentional criminal acts. It's $2 million per occurrence with $100,000 retention. The cost of this insurance also has gone up, and it's $210,183 for the last layer of the combined liability. The next ordinance is 15911, which is our auto liability. This is with Phoenix Travelers Insurance. This insurance policy covers any bodily injury or property damage made against MSD due to negligent use of our vehicles. Previously, we were covering 360 vehicles. Now we're covering 392 vehicles. It does exclude any nuclear attacks, war, pollution, and intentional criminal acts made with vehicles. It's $2 million per accident, and there's various deductibles depending on what type of accident that is. The cost of this insurance has gone up, and it's primarily due to the fact that we're covering more vehicles. The total cost is $362,260. The next insurance I'd like you to look at is ordinance number 15912, for the public official excess liability insurance, and that's with ACE Insurance Company. This insurance provides defense coverage for wage and hourly actions and inverse condemnation actions against members of our employees and also members of the board. It excludes the same things that we were talking about before: nuclear attacks, pollution, and any criminal acts as well. That insurance is for $2 million per occurrence with $100,000 retention. The cost of this insurance has gone up slightly, and it's $125,000. The next layer of excess liability is our first layer, and it's ordinance number 15913. This insurance provides additional $5 million worth of excess liability coverage. It excludes any sexual abuse, nuclear attacks, war, pollution, or intentional criminal acts. It's $5 million per occurrence, and the cost of this insurance has gone up again, and this is $489,968. The next ordinance is 15914, which is the second layer of our excess liability. It's with Gemini for $5 million. It covers the same items for up to $5 million with auto liability, public officials, and it does exclude any sexual abuse, nuclear attacks, war, pollution, and intentional criminal acts. It's $5 million per occurrence, and the cost of our second layer of insurance is $350,000. The third layer of our excess liability is ordinance number 15915. It's with Lexington AIG. This policy covers $5 million of excess insurance for the same items we've mentioned previously before. It excludes sexual abuse, nuclear attack, war, pollution, and intentional criminal acts. This insurance is for $5 million. And the cost of this insurance has also gone up, and it is $215,000. And the next insurance we have is ordinance number 15916, which is our cyber insurance. This insurance provides security, privacy, and liability regulation in the event that there's a cyber attack or extortion on the district. The cost of this insurance is $5 million with $100,000 retention. The cost of this has gone up significantly in terms of it's got now $130,000. But what I would like to point out is that cyber insurance is extremely difficult to even retain at this particular point. Based off of everything that our IT department has done, we were able to not lose any amount of insurance. It just has gone up in cost because in general, there's been a lot of ransom attacks. The next one I would like to point out is ordinance number 15917, which is our contractors pollution liability. This insurance is with AIG Specialty Insurance Company. It covers any losses or cleanups, claims made against MSD for pollution conditions as a result of an MSD contractor. This insurance is $3 million per pollution incident, and the cost of this insurance has gone down. it is $7,953. The next ordinance is 15918, which is the contractor's equipment for the inland marine. This is with Markle Insurance Company. This policy covers about $4 million worth of equipment, and it will provide up to $250,000 per any damaged piece of equipment that we have from contractors. The deductible on this insurance is $2,500 for the cost of the equipment and $100,000 for the property expenses. Annual cost for the insurance is $14,225. The next ordinance is 15919, which is the commercial crime insurance. Travelers' casualty is insured for this particular insurance. This policy pays for financial losses due to employee dishonesty, stealing of funds, theft, robbery, monies, or securities, or any kind of computer fraud. It excludes nuclear attack and pollution. It is a $10 million policy with a $50,000 deductible, and the cost of this insurance has gone down slightly, and it's $59,213. If you guys will flip to the next, the back page of the document that I gave you. At the top of that page, we have ordinance number 15920. This is the fiduciary liability insurance that we have with Federal Insurance Company. This policy covers any financial losses for the mishandling of employee benefits plan. It excludes nuclear attacks, war, pollution, and intentional criminal acts. The cost of this insurance is $15 million per occurrence, and the cost of the insurance has not changed. It stayed the same from last year, and it's $92,534. The next ordinance is ordinance number 15921 for the fiduciary second layer liability insurance. It's with Travelers Insurance. This policy covers any financial losses to the mishandling of the employee benefits plan as the previous first layer. It also excludes nuclear attacks, war, pollution, and intentional criminal acts. It's $10 million of additional excess insurance with a $50,000 deductible per occurrence. And the cost of this insurance has gone up slightly, and it's $39,000 annually. The next ordinance is ordinance number 15922, which is the excess workers' compensation. This is a state requirement for us to have this particular insurance. This insurance has a $2 million coverage for our employees for workers' compensation and a $500,000 retention. The cost of this insurance has gone up slightly, and it's $299,300 for the state required insurance. The next ordinance is ordinance number 15923. This is the sewer backup and liability insurance. It's with Iron Shore Specialty Insurance Company. This insurance helps MSD for any liabilities due to blocked mains. It covers all of our locations, but it also excludes nuclear attack, war, and intentional criminal acts. It's $1 million per block claim, and it has different deductibles based on whatever the damages were. The annual cost of this insurance has gone up, and it's $406,565. The next ordinance is ordinance number 15924, which is the Missouri Petroleum Tank Insurance. This insurance covers the cleanup costs caused by any release of petroleum from any of our storage tanks. It covers a cleanup cost up to $2,000, and the cost of this insurance is $2,000 per annual cost. So, and that's going to be reducing some because we're getting rid of some of those. The next ordinance is ordinance number 15925, which is the National Flood Insurance Program. This policy covers any physical damages to loss to buildings or contents of those buildings caused by a flood. It covers 36 of our buildings, And the maximum limit for the buildings is $500,000. The contents are also $500,000, and the deductible is anywhere from $1,000 to $50,000, depending on what items were damaged. The annual cost of that insurance has gone up, and now it is $300,000 annually. And the last liability insurance we have is ordinance number 15926, which is the major facility pollutions liability. This insurance is covered by Ironshore Specialty Insurance Company. It would cover any of the cleanup costs due to claims or suits made against MSD by pollution conditions or caused by our treatment plants or any of our lagoons. It excludes a nuclear attack, war, or intentional criminal acts. It's $10 million per occurrence and a $500,000 retention on this one. The cost of this annual insurance is $80,042, and it has gone up last year. Trustees, do you have any questions or concerns about the liability insurances?
Thank you, Ms. Coleman.
Thank you for your time.
Folks, item 6 is a requirement to go into closed session to discuss leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate under section 610.021, paragraph 2. Can I get a motion to go into closed session?
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Trustee Watson? Trustee Wabi? Are you muted, Trustee Wabi? Okay, Trustee Nikozison?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Fair?
Yes.
Trustee Evans?
Yes.
All right, we are in closed session. We'll note that we've not gotten a vote from Trustee Wabi.
Get a,
Hold on, Trustee Wilson. You ready to go? Okay, now they're ready.
gonna get a motion to come out of closed session.
So move, second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, with, there's no further business, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, it's been a pleasure of my life. The meeting is adjourned.
So moved.
There he is.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good week, folks.
Take care.